of examples on how to factor a quadratic expression where the leading coefficient is not 1. Here it's a lot more important that you do check for a GCF, because sometimes you're going to end up with a GCF and then you have an expression that is easier to factor, and we don't actually have to work quite so hard if we take out that GCF. So let's go ahead and walk through this example. So the first thing, of course, is look for a GCF. And we're going to use this example over here. Okay, so with this method, we're going to break that middle term apart a little bit. And in order to do that, we're going to start by multiplying the 15x squared by the 4. So I'm going to take these two things and bring them together as a product. We're going to multiply the first and last term, and we are going to get 60x squared. Now I'm going to break these two pieces apart into factors that add up, and we're adding because this last is add, to make 23. So or 23x, sorry. So let's think about the factors of 60. We got 1 and 60. We have 2 and 30. We have 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, and 6 and 10. All right, so thinking about this list of factors, which of these add up to make 23? Here we go. We got this 23 here. Okay, so we're going to take this. Okay, so how do we do this? We're trying to factor a quadratic expression that has a leading coefficient in front of that x squared term that's not 1. It makes it a little bit trickier. But with this method, you can pretty easily do this factoring. It really just does what we did before, the technique we did before with a leading coefficient of 1, and adds one other step to it. Okay, so here we go. Take your first term and your last term and bring them together as a product. So multiply the first and last term. That should give you 60x squared. Okay. Now we're going to take that term and break it into two pieces that add to give me 23. 23x. Okay. So let's think about what are the factors of 60. And probably helpful to make a list, right? Let's go 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10. And that's the list of factors. So I'm looking for something on this list that adds to give me 23, and I find it here at 3 and 20. So I'm going to take this 60x squared, and I am going to get out of the glare, right? And I'm going to break this into 20x and 3x. And it does not really matter, actually it doesn't matter at all, if the 20x comes first or the 3x comes first. But it does matter the sign. Remember that to get something positive on the end, these two things must be the same sign. And it must be the sign of that middle term. And that middle term is negative, so these two things need to be negative as well. Now we're going to bring the first and last terms down. And we're going to say that this is 15x squared, and this is 4. Okay, now we are situated in a place we can factor the resulting polynomial by grouping. Looking at this group, what is the greatest common factor? 15x squared and negative 20x, that GCF is going to be 5x. And if I divide it out of both of these pieces, I have 3x minus 4. Okay. Now on the other end, we're going to bring the sign down, and I'm thinking about 3x plus 4. Is the GCF, I don't think I know any, so I think it's just going to be 1. And so now I'm going to divide the negative 1 out of the negative 3x, and the negative 1 out of the positive 4. And I can take this, and I can take these two large pieces and factor the 3x minus 4 out of both, and I'm left with 5x minus 1. Now if I redistribute, I should end up back to where I began, right up here. Okay, so let's try. 3x times 5x is 15x squared. 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. negative 4 times 5x, that's negative 20x. And the negative 4 times the negative 1 is positive 4. So I have 15x squared minus 23x, positive 4. And if I check that to what I began with, I'm right there, right back where I began. So that's a great thing. I have factored this correctly. Let's do one more example. It's going to be negative. We're going to use that same technique and make that adjustment that we did when we had a leading coefficient that was 1. Remember that instead of thinking about two things that add together, we're going to use two things that subtract to get that middle term. But we still have to do that initial thing. When you have something out here first, we need to bring it together as a product. 6x squared times negative 2, or we can just call it 2, negative 12x squared. And then we are thinking about things, let's just remember that when you've got that leading coefficient that's not 1, you have to start this process by multiplying the first and last term. And we can disregard this negative sign when we do that. We're thinking about the product of 6x squared and 2, which is 12x squared. And then we want to think about what are the factors of 12 that subtract to make 1. Okay, so 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Which of these pairs of factors subtract to give me 1? Okay, and we know that this answer is going to be 3 and 4. So we're going to break this apart into 3x and 4x. And remember, to get something negative here, we need to have a positive and a negative factor. And the larger of the two will take this negative sign. So the negative will go on the 4x, while a positive will go on the 3x. Go ahead and bring your 6x squared and negative 2 down. Okay. And now we're going to factor by grouping. Looking at this first group and the second group. What comes out of that first group? I believe that would be 3x, and we would have 2x plus 1 left. Now if I look here, I'm going to keep that negative, and I'm thinking about 4x minus 2. What comes out of both of those as a common factor? That would be 2. And actually, since that negative's there, it's negative 2. So I want to think about negative 4x divided by negative 2, which is positive 2x. And negative 2 divided by negative 2, that's a positive 1. So as we finish this up, we end up with that GCF of those two big groups is 2x plus 1. And if I divide it out of both of the other groups, I get 3x minus 2 as my other binomial. Okay, we got two other examples up here. I'm not going to talk as much through these two. You're going to try these. And I'll give you a couple of hints along the way, but this would be a good place to pause this video and see if you can do this on your own. 60x squared, breaking into 15 and 4. 15x, 4x, and positive, negative, 10x squared minus 6. 5x, 2x plus 3, negative 2, 2x plus 3. So 2x plus 3 times 5x minus 2. Here, oh, this is a good one to look at, because what do you see that goes into everything? 5. Let's take the 5 out to begin. 5 times x squared plus x minus 6. I think we did something like this already, didn't we? And look, now I've got to factor something that does not have a leading coefficient greater than 1. And this is so much easier to factor. Keeping that 5, we can call this, let's see, what multiplies to make 6 but subtracts to make 1, that's 3 and 2, right? And one of them needs to be positive, the other negative. The larger one needs to be this sign, so the 3 is positive while the 2 is negative. All right. So now it's time for you to try some. Practice some from the homework that I've given you, or if you're not my student, that your instructor or professor has given you, and I'll see you next time.